Hi, and in this fourth installment on preparing for the Tomb of Sargeras, what we're going to look at is positioning. So positioning in a raid is really important for all roles, and there are several reasons why we need to get the positioning correct. The first one is in order to maximize your output, whether that be DPS or healing potential. So for a melee DPS, you want to be ideally behind the mob that you need to be DPSing, of course, so that you don't have parries. If you're a ranged DPS, you want to position yourself so, of course, that you're always in range of the mob you're attacking. But if there's a target switching situation, you also ideally want to be in a position where you could switch to that target without movement or without too much movement at any rate. So thinking about positioning yourself between them if other mechanics allow. For a healer, same sort of thing. You want to be able to plant your feet as a healer as much as possible, but again, you want to make sure that you're in range of all the different groups who are not necessarily all stacked in one place these days. So can you reach everyone that you might need to heal at any particular time? If you know there's going to be some movement, can you get back quickly as well? The second reason is to enhance your view of the fight arena. There are various times where during a fight, some ads may come in, or there may be something on the floor you need to be aware of. And can you see these things? Are you able to see what you need to see? That can include other players, of course. Part of this can be enhanced by zooming the camera out beyond where the normal options allow you to do it. There is a macro you can use that will allow you to zoom it out as far as is possible. I'll put that up there, so if any of you don't have that, that's quite useful. But also you want to think about positioning. Sometimes, especially in smaller rooms, you might position yourself such that the wall is right behind you. At that point, the camera will automatically zoom in anyway, because obviously it's not going to see through a wall. So that can vastly reduce. So sometimes just moving yourself a little bit to one side or the other moves your back away from that wall and massively expands the arena of that encounter that you are able to see. You want to see as much as possible. This is also really important for tanks as well, because it's not always easy for tanks, because they might, be under the testicles of the boss and they can't necessarily see a lot of the other raid, but you want to try and again position so that you can see as much as possible, so you can see as much as possible as what is going on. Another positioning concern is to maximize AoE. So it's one thing to be able to be in range or in the appropriate position behind a boss or a mob that you're attacking. But when AoE happens, do you sometimes have to shift your position? Are you able with your AoE spells to get all of them? So usually this means with a strict AoE that you move yourself sort of centrally within the group of mobs that you're wanting to AoE down. Sometimes if it's like a cone ability you've got, it means sort of moving to the edge of them, in fact, so that you can make sure your ability hits all of them that way. But it's a case of being aware of your particular class and spec and what's important for that, and maybe shifting your position slightly so that you can hit as many of the things that you need to hit while you're doing AoE. The fourth thing is to manage splash damage mechanics. So this is now not so much about your own personal DPS, this is about not killing other people or yourself. So there are some fights in Nighthold, for example, where this was a key consideration. Star Augur on Mythic mode being king amongst them with Grand Conjunction. So for this one, we needed to make sure that when Grand Conjunction comes in, that you are not within range of another player, because then if you both get the different constellation, which is pretty likely, then you're going to cause a Grand Trine, and basically that's a wipe. So you need to consider with your positioning, are you in a spot where everyone else knows that that's your spot and everyone else is in their spot? And when these mechanics happen, and on fights where they do happen, they happen quite a lot, that you're not going to get in each other's way, because you're not psychic, you're not able to sort of say, oh, well, I'll move there, they'll move there. You need to sort this out in advance. And the way to make sure that that happens is by picking a spot. Finally, it is to minimize the amount of movement when movement is required. So sometimes you do have to move. So it's a case of positioning yourself so that when it has to happen, you're moving as little as possible. So this might mean for ranged on Tichondrius, for example, that they're positioned fairly close to where the pillars are likely to spawn. There's a little bit of RNG about where the pillars spawn, but when they do, so that they don't have to move a lot to be able to deal with that. Also, when you have a spot to deal and break Brands of Argus, that again, they're not miles away from that spot as well. On Mythic Gul'dan, for example, when the bonds come in, I suppose this could apply to any version of Gul'dan, but it's not as important except at Mythic, to make sure that you're all sort of in a line so that any people that do get the bonds will all get blown back the same direction, minimises movement for breaking people out of it as well there. Any situation where you know you need to move, it's position yourself so that you don't have to move very much, because the more you're moving, the more DPS you're losing. As a healer, the more healing effectively you're losing. You may actually be moving out of range of the other people as well. Now, generally speaking, and for all of these reasons, the best way to get consistent progress on an encounter is for everyone to be consistent themselves. And a big part of this is position. Have a spot where you always stand at certain parts of the fight. It may not be the spot you stand throughout the whole fight, but at certain parts of the fight. Now, 3 great fights to highlight this are the last 3 in Nighthold, which is Mythic Star Augur, Mythic Elisand, Mythic Gul'dan. The same could equally apply to the heroic versions, in fact, in terms of positioning. But for Mythic Star Augur especially, Grand Conjunction is an ability where when this comes in, it gives you a constellation, and it does, if you're on someone else with a different constellation, or even very close to them, then you get a bit of an explosion, hits the raid, but it also gives a debuff to everyone, which basically means you're going to wipe, because you're going to take a ridiculous amount of damage from the arcane stuff now. So you need a spot, because it's no good just getting people when Grand Conjunction is coming in to sort of spread. That's not going to work, because you know how it is. Someone will go one way, another person will go that same way, and it's a bit like trying to get past someone in a corridor. You both keep going the same way. So you need a spot. In fact, I had a mantra that I kept saying to people right away when we started progressing on this. I said to people, you need to find a spot that is your spot, and you need to say this. This is my spot. There are many like it, but this one is mine. So I picked out this particular spot. That is where I always go, at all parts of the fight where it is possible. The only phase where it's not really possible, well, there's quite a lot of the last phase, I suppose, but the fell phase, you know, because there might be stuff there. But where it is free, and certainly in the first 2 phases, that is where I am. And that is where I always return to, even if I have to move. So that way, when Grand Conjunction comes in, I can carry on DPSing safely. I don't have to worry about anything until I'm able to see what constellation I have and then decide where I need to move. Elisand is another thing. On Elisand Mythic, the DPS is much more important. You know how it is on Heroic and Normal. The rings come in, and there's a gap on, you know, you use the blue bubble to slow them down, so gaps appear. Well, gaps will appear on both sides. And you know, sometimes some people will go one way and some will go the other. And sometimes you can find yourself stranded from the boss, so particularly as melee, you're not doing so much damage then. Oh dear, how annoying. Well, on Mythic, that's pretty bad because there's a DPS check. You need everyone to be on the boss. So you need to coordinate which side you're going to go to. So the way we did it is I was coordinating this during progress. And I said, for the first one, we'll just go through the largest gap because that's the side the boss has gone to. We'll get onto the boss much more quickly that way. However, whenever orbs come in, which is always from the second one onwards in each phase, where there's a blue ad up somewhere else at the other side of the room, we're going to move to that side. And the reason for that was, 1, consistent, so everyone knew which side we would move to, but 2, because there were people who were having to interrupt and DPS that ad, and obviously moving to that side made it easier for them. So we had a system so that we should know which side we were going to move to. And that's the system we got into. Again, consistency. We always knew where we were going to move. We don't have to be telepathic. We don't need people to be able to tell us. We've got a system. Mythic Gul'dan, there's lots of positioning in all of the phases. In phase 1, for example, we need to make sure that at the start of the fight, we're all stacked together so that when the first bonds come in, that we're all stacked up and we can move as one and we all distribute the damage by breaking them all as one. After that, we need to make sure the healers are right behind the boss because that's where the Hand of Gul'dan is going to spawn for the first ad, and we want that right behind the boss so we can be cleaving it down and DPSing it down. We want to kill that before it casts its second soul prism. So positioning really, really crucial here. If we have a healer, you know, who's just stood out doing their own thing, then the Hand of Gul'dan, if it hits them, is going to spawn way away. We may not get that ad down in time. In fact, when that did happen a couple of times, we didn't get the ad down in time. It was quite messy. Then the eyes are going to spawn. Now, on Mythic Gul'dan, you tank the boss right by the edge to reduce the area over which those Eyes of Gul'dan can spread out, because we want to AoE them down. Now, when you do this on Heroic, especially when you first learn it, you'll often have to hard swap to those eyes to get them all down. You can't really AoE them because they spread out all over the place. Tanking the boss at the edge reduces the possibility to do that, so they're all reasonably stacked. So then you need to AoE. But again, it's positioning of that. So if you're someone who has a literal AoE, it's all around them, a particular range, then you need to try and position yourself centrally with regards to those. Whilst preferably if you're melee, being in the melee range, you can still be hitting off the boss. If, like me, your AoE is actually projected forwards, it might be a cone or something like that, then you actually want to position yourself so that as many of them as possible are in front of you. So that's like, imagine all these ads are forming a ball. You want to be moving out to the outside edge of that ball, facing into it. So that's you can see the positioning that I shift here as I try and do that, because my AoE, as I say, projects 20 yards forwards. So that's what I'm always trying to do there. When it comes to the mechanics, I've already mentioned the bonds. When you get the bonds, you want to sort of be lined up, everyone lined up, so you all get blown back in the same place. And if that happens, then that means someone, the healer in this particular case, is able to place their bubble. Everyone can run into it and break themselves out. You can see here, actually on our kill, I wasn't quite lined up, and I got blown slightly off course, which means I wasn't able to get to that bubble. That delayed me because I had to then move away. And some people might look at this, especially if you don't know the fact, you might be thinking, why? I've popped my bubble to get out of it. Why don't I just carry on the direction I'm going at? That's another positioning issue. When you break yourself out of your bonds, you do some AoE damage around you, 5-yard range. So anyone within that is also going to take that damage. It's a lot of damage. It'll kill people. So I also had to make sure that I positioned myself so that when I was breaking it, I was away from those people because there was no protection for anyone in that vicinity. Then in phase 2, you've got to be carefully considering your position here as well, because you've got the winds that come in. I mean, on Heroic and Normal, these just happen at the start of the phase, but in actual fact, in Mythic, they happen throughout the phase. And they always move from north to south. So you always want to be away from the south edge, otherwise you're going to get blown off. So again, considering your position here so that you can make sure that you will never get blown off. You always know how far in you need to be at least, so that you can still maintain DPS, but you know you're not going to get blown off as well. Positioning with Flames of Sargeras. How many times have we had this situation where everything's going swimmingly, then all of a sudden a dozen flames all spawn underneath the melee especially, and everyone's dead. So making sure, this is a positioning thing where you know an ability is going to come in, you know you're going to have to move, but there isn't a dedicated spot to move to. You've got a general advice. If you have Flames of Sargeras, you want to move towards the edge. Well, it's a big circular room. There's lots of edge. So where exactly? This is a classic case of being aware that there's a mechanic coming in, and you should think to yourself in advance, if it were to hit me, where would I go? So you can be moving your camera around, you've seen where's free, you can think to yourself, okay, if this comes in now and hits me, I'm going to go over there. The same thing can apply to, say, Star Augur when you get Icy Ejection. On Mythic, you really have to get this out to the edge as well. Again, before the ability comes in, have a little nosy round, have a look round, see where's free, and go, okay, if it goes on me, I'm going to go there. So you don't have to think about it. You don't delay time thinking about it. Because if you do that, you might end up putting it in the wrong place. You might end up hitting a lot of other people as well. They're not going to thank you for that. So again, it's also thinking about positioning in advance as well. So hopefully I've given you some ideas about the importance of positioning there. It is something for every single fight that you should consciously think about. Whenever you're preparing for a fight, whenever you're progressing on a fight and you're doing a debrief of your own performance, positioning should always be one of the things you are thinking about. Can I change my position and improve things? Can other people change their position, improve things? Maybe I can suggest things to them. It always should be front and center of your thinking on how to improve the progress on a boss. And I'll go over the 5 reasons again, just as a summary here. So remember, it's there to maximize your output, whether that be DPS or healing. It's there to enhance your view of the actual encounter arena. It's there to maximize your AoE potential, again, whether that's DPS or healing. It's there to be able to allow you to manage splash mechanics. In other words, mechanics when they hit you, they're going to do damage to other people if they're too close. So Horn of Valor, Grand Conjunction, the Eyes of Gul'dan, for example. And 5, it's there to minimize the amount of movement when you do have to move. So when you do have to move, you've put yourself in a position where you didn't actually have to move that far and still get back to a good position for the fight. So I hope you found this useful. If you did, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe and share for further content. And until next time, I'll see you later.